extending all of you a warm welcome. The topic of the webinar today is automated takeoff and estimating, and we'll be covering three main themes. They are reduce, avoid, and improve. I have my colleague who is a technical support engineer with MagiCAD, and he's going to help out with the demo today. So just setting the agenda for today's presentation, we'll do a quick introduction of the MagiCAD and the Glodon Group. I'll talk about a special offer for attendees. So every attendee, they get a free 2 weeks trial, and I'll share some details in a second. We're also sharing results for a poll. Not sure how many people remember, but when you're filling out the registration details, there was a mini poll about things that impede your productivity as an estimator. So we'll see what the results are, and we'll talk a little bit about the current practices in the estimating world here in UK and other parts of the world, and what the issues are with those existing approaches. Then I'll talk a little bit. I'll explain these three different themes, and in what context do we want, in what context do we want to explain those themes. Then I'll hand over to Ehsan, my colleague, who will do a quick demo for you guys to showcase as to what some of these capabilities are, and we'll do a Q&A towards the end. So, so looking at MagiCAD Group, we've been going around for 35 years now. If you look at some of the other numbers here, we have got a presence in 180 countries. So we pretty much cover all of the world, if you think about it. And we've got around 40,000 plus desktop users all around the world. So we are leaders in MEP design software. We have our headquarters in Finland. And we've been going, we're a very stable company providing great products. We've been going around for 35 years now. In 2014, we joined hands with Glodon Group of China, who are the 5th largest player when it comes to AEC, architecture, engineering, and construction solutions. And they've got a really solid reputation all around the world in terms of developing highly automated BIM-driven tools for construction professionals. So if you just look at the map here, the blue dots represent the Glodon Group offices, and the orange ones are MagiCAD. And together as a unit, we're able to offer great products for construction product professionals here in UK, along with the rest of the world. So coming to poll results, the jury is out. I'd asked 4 questions, and I wanted your opinion in terms of what you think are the main impediments to productivity as an estimator. So the majority of you have pointed out that manual measurements, let's say by using in an Excel sheets, is a huge impediment. And I can actually relate to that. I'm not an estimator. I don't come from a quantity surveying background. But my colleagues and the conversation I've had with my colleagues, with my clients, I get a sense that it's a real problem in the industry. Then there's the second impediment you have said is lack of integration between takeoff and estimating, which gives me the impression that you'd ideally want to have a solution that can take care of both of these rather than just one. So you don't have to use 2 different solutions. And then there's a time between the third and the fourth option, which is dealing with design changes, which means that you have to do a lot of remeasurements. And fourth is limited use of BIM models. So in our presentation today, and the themes that we're covering will show you as to how we can address all of these issues with our solution. So let's see as to what some of the current practices in the estimating industry are. The first is that Excel sheet is used by a lot of estimators out there. And in addition to that, what we've also seen is that they usually use it in a combination with an on-screen takeoff software, so which helps you, get your lengths and areas and other measurements quite rapidly. But those, usually we have seen that, either people are using Excel or they're using a combination of an on-screen takeoff or an Excel sheet. The third, we've seen some solutions out there. We've seen some people using some sort of a BIM version of takeoff. And there's a lot of jargon out there in terms of the fact that that software, there are estimating solutions that come with a lot of BIM capabilities, but it's also important to understand as to what those capabilities are. So next time someone makes a claim, you should ask them the question, well, what does that mean when you say that it's a BIM capable solution? Because you get to understand as to what the intricacies are and how it can help you deal with BIM models more efficiently. So with current practices, what are some of the issues that estimators come across? Well, the big issue, the elephant in the room, that most of the estimating is manual in nature, which means that you're doing all of it manually. And if there are any errors, if there are any issues with the calculations, then you have to resort to the manual process. So either there is some automation or a very little automation to work with. The second is that as part of your estimations, you generate a few measurements, but what we've seen in practice is that people will use these measurements as fundamental measurements and then build on top of that to generate additional measurements. So which means that, well, you do have access to some measurements in the beginning, but then as a follow-up, you still have to generate some additional measurements manually. And say if you're working on a project where it's required for you to comply with a measurement standard, say SMM7 or NRM, then you need to be mindful of those rules as well and how certain deductions are applied in specific situations. But you've got to remember those. You've still got to remember those. And the third issue in the industry is how you deal with errors. Let's say you've done a calculation and an error has somehow crept in. Well, how do you know where you have made the error? Because if you have done a lot of calculation on Excel sheet, if you have got connected formulas from one tab to another, it can be a really painful exercise just to go through all of those and try and find the error. And if your client comes back to you and say, well, there's been a change in design, can you, send me the new measurements? So you're pretty much in the same spot that way. Well, when it comes to MagiCAD and some of the solutions that we offer, so we have a slightly different approach to all of these issues, and I'll explain it, one point at a time. So one of the themes for this presentation was reduce. Now, what I mean by that is we help you reduce your estimating time. And how we do that? By giving you access to automated features. Now, if it was all manual, then as I said, it can be a nightmare, especially if you're dealing with a large and complex project. But because there's a lot of automation built into our products, it means that a lot of occasions you don't even have to think about doing any process manually. Automation takes care of all of that, and Ehsan will explain it in some detail when he's doing the demo. You'll see that with the automation, your estimation process takes a lot less time, and which then means that you can do more estimates in less time as well. The second theme I want to touch upon is the avoid theme. Now, what do I mean when I say that? When I use the term avoid, I mean that you're actually avoiding duplication of efforts. As I said, if you refer to this image here, that you start with a few measurements and then build up your additional measurements, MagiCAD takes care of all of that. So if you have a few measurements, then there is some intelligence built in the platform, which means that for all the additional measurements, it's all automatically factored in. And if you're working with rules, well, it's even easier, because irrespective of what rules you're working with, there's a drop-down menu at the beginning. All you do is just pick one of these rules, and any calculation you do subsequently factors in any specific deductions for those rules. All automated, all taken care of. The third theme is the improve theme. And when I use the term improve, I mean we help you improve the accuracy of your calculations. So usually if you're working with an Excel sheet, if you've made an error or if there's a change in design, which means you have to make some changes in your measurements, then it's really complicated. It can be really difficult sometimes to get hold of all your calculations and try and find an audit trail. But we offer a feature called reverse check, which kind of takes care of all of that. So from an error situation, you're in a situation where you have got complete audit trail. And again, as I said, some of this will become more evident in the demo, but the reverse check helps you create a link between all your calculations and between your calculations on the model itself. So these are the three themes that I wanted to talk about. That's reduce, avoid, and improve. And the next.
Hello and welcome to the demo section of the webinar. It's me, Asan, and I'm going to go over the key themes covered by Animesh earlier. So the themes were reduce, how you can reduce your time wasted and add value where it matters most. Avoid duplication of effort. That's with the use of our intelligent measurement rules. And finally, improve your accuracy of calculation. Here I'm creating a new project so I can demonstrate this to you. As you can see, when we create a new project, we get the option straight away to choose between NRM2 or SMM7. Of course, if you are viewing this webinar from elsewhere, we have local packs depending on the country you're living in as well, for quite a few of them, so please do get in touch. Once the project has been initialized and it's loaded up, you'll be presented with this view. What you'll notice is up top we can work in BIM, so you can import IFC, you can also export IFC, and finally import Revit models, and finally if the Revit model has a change you can work with them as well. Another way you can work is by identifying. Identifying is our process in which I'll be covering today. So that's for our 2D to 3D takeoff. It's when we try and speed up the process by using either layers or colors to do the takeoff. And finally, manual takeoff as well. So if, for instance, uh, automated is not what you want to do and just manual is better, then you can do a manual takeoff as well. I've just brought in this drawing. Um, as you can see, this is a structural model with some very common building elements. So that is a beam. We also have a column here. And the other one is it's just a slab and some openings. So before I move on to the next section, one of the things which I wanted to cover was digitalization. This is a 2D drawing, it's a CAD file, but whether it's CAD or PDF, it doesn't really matter, just because we're able to automatically color it. The reason we color it is because if layers are not available, then we can automate the takeoff based on colors. So that's why when we pick the sideline and try and tell the software that the outsides or the outskirts of a certain building element, building entity represents a column, a beam, or any other building element, then it's able to identify the rest. Now what we'll try and do is go to a column in the drawing, zoom in to all the software that the outskirts, that outer layer represents a column, and then we are able to drag identify to say what that building element is. As you can see, irrespective of the shape, it's automatically found all of the columns which are present on this floor. Now, if I drag a box across certain ones, it's able to give it its properties, and I can just do the same thing for all of it because I know that's right, as they are all columns. You'll notice on the left hand side they've been automatically categorized. So you can see the T-shaped, it's got the sectional width, sectional height as well. I can click on any of the categories and see how many of them have been used in the software in this project, this takeoff. So that's 3. I can change the attributes whenever I like, and Doing so will not only change how the object looks, not only change the model, but it will also reflect the quantities that it generates, how it interacts with other building elements also. You can also change the concrete grade. By default, it's C30, but of course that's something we can change in the backlog or directly here. So if I was to just calculate the quantities for the columns, let's see what we've generated. So we can view expression to see which calculations would be used. Or what we can do is we can just head over to view quantity, and now we can see that it's been split by floor, material, concrete grade, entity type. I've got area of formwork, number of pieces, weight of rebar, the girth. And if I was to head over to set classification and quantity, I can make this as simple as I like just by including the name. And if there's anything I'm not interested, if any of the quantity is there, I can just simply uncheck it. And I can either save this view or export it to Excel, and so on. So that's what we mean by um, having to avoid duplication of effort. Just because we have the intelligent measurement built in, you automatically generate advanced measures. Now, if I was to repeat the process for the beam, it's exactly the same. Just recognize which in the drawing where the beam is, and then you could automatically identify it. So one thing which I didn't mention was whether it's 2D, whether it's DWG, PDF, it's automatically recolored in our software. It's recolored because you can do it by layer or color. Furthermore, let's do the slab now. So when we identify the slab, it bases it off enclosed areas, and it's able to do that. And of course, we can change the settings over here, which will impact the quantities. So if I was to just recalculate this and then just view the quantities, you'll get a very similar view as you got earlier. You have the building elements on the left hand side, and depending on the building element you're in, it will get its respective quantities automatically generated. So there's quite advanced measures, and you can just export this to Excel whenever you like. For instance, here you have it separated by column, beam, and slab. Now, I've got a question for you. And the question is, how do you respond to change in a model? Suppose there's a design revision or anything else like that. How do you respond to it? Let's give this a test. So here what I'm doing is I'm just linking some of the quantities to a BQ to an Excel file. So let's take the total volume of the columns and just drop it in. This is much better with two screens, but let's just cope with it for now. And let's also drag and drop the total quantity for the slab. What we can now do is we can save a baseline. Saving baseline means if there's any variation, they will all be accounted for. So suppose we just reverse check this first, see where the quantity is coming from. So it just takes you to it directly. Another thing we can do is we can see the association status to see which quantities have been linked, what has been linked, and that turns to green. If a quantity has been associated repeatedly, then it turns purple. I'll just demonstrate that to you on beams here. So if I associate the beam once, it turns green. And if I was to just drag and drop it, let's say here, it turns purple. It's just so you know when you're double counting. So moving on to my example, how do you deal with design change? I've saved a baseline and I know that that quantity has been associated. What I can do is I can reversely check the model. So reversely checking allows me to improve my accuracy of my calculations. Here, what that means is um, I can look at quantities, just go back to it, and just make sure are there any anomalies? Is there anything over here? Just quickly glance through. I just noticed the 0.450. If, for instance, that is something which is standing out and I just want to visualize it further or just interrogate it, I can see the attributes for that entity change its color and it's been associated differently now. I could also change the name as well, so it's categorized completely separately in my report, but I'll just skip that uh, for now. Well, let's say you receive a design change, and the design change, this 300 by 400, so all of those blue ones, have changed, and let's say there's been an increase. Something ridiculous. Let's say it's 350. No, let's say it's 750 by 750. And let's also change it, the color. This is really beneficial because you can even export this as IFC. So just for visualization, it's great. And let's say there's been further changes and the thickness has been reduced from 120 to 100. Now if we're to recalculate this, run the quantities, just wait for it to complete and head back over to our BQ section, we are now able to see our original baseline was 18.75. New calculated quantity is 42.645, and there's been an increase of 23. If you were to do the same thing and just interrogate slab, you can see there's been a reduction as it's a negative number. Just imagine this is just the first floor. Suppose it was a 20-story building, just accounting for those small changes. It can lead up to quite. It just gives you that confidence in the in your numbers, in just knowing that yes, I'm happy with the quantities that are being generated. Furthermore, what you can do is let's have a look at the expressions again, where you can see how the quantities are being calculated. If, for instance, you want to see how this, let's say this slab, let's see how this slab is being calculated. We can see the 3D deduction. We are able to see the original quantity, how it's deducted from the beam, and so on. So that's very powerful in its own sense, where you can see exactly how your quantities are being calculated, how they're being generated. So you can not only reduce your effort, so avoid manually doing the calculation of pretty much anything you have to do. You also have the power of changing the measurement settings, the measurement rules, so you can just really hone in on getting your quantities, and instead of you spending countless hours calculating certain sections, it's just a matter of you just clicking calculate and just knowing that yes, your quantities, they conform to SMM7 if that's what you've chosen. So that's it. You can then get your quantity by category, have your building elements on the left hand side, and just export it to Excel. And as you know, depending on the type of building material or the building element you're in, they'll get their own respective calculations. Being able to reverse check the model, it just gives you that further reassurance that your quantities are correct. You know exactly where your quantities are coming from. Thanks, guys. So that's it for the demo section.